Something happened recently, something quiet and almost invisible from the outside, but deeply significant on their side, and it is something you were never meant to ignore, even if you are only now beginning to feel that something is shifting without fully understanding why. Your soulmate sat down in a moment of stillness, a moment that did not seem important at first, just another part of an ordinary day, but something inside them felt different this time. There was a weight in their thoughts, a quiet pull that kept bringing them back to you again and again, in a way that felt stronger than before. At first, they tried to move past it, to continue with what they were doing, to treat it like any other passing thought. But this time, it didn't pass. It stayed. It lingered in a way that demanded attention. And when a thought demands attention like that, it usually means something deeper is trying to surface. They began to feel a kind of emotional pressure, not overwhelming, but steady, as if something inside them was asking to be expressed rather than hidden. Before we dive into today's word, I want to thank our coffee partners. We are currently working toward a $120 goal to keep this ministry running and improve our quality. If this channel has been a blessing to you, please check the link in the description or comment box to support. Now, let's get into today's devotion. For a long time, they had been holding things in, feelings, thoughts, realizations they didn't fully understand or didn't feel ready to face. They told themselves it wasn't necessary to say anything, that things could remain as they were, that silence was easier than risking vulnerability. But silence does not erase what is felt. It only delays the moment when it has to be acknowledged. And this moment, the one they found themselves in, became that point where delay was no longer possible. They reached for something simple, a way to put their thoughts somewhere outside of themselves, even if no one else would see it. And that is when they began to write. At first, it was slow. The words didn't come easily, because what they were trying to express wasn't simple. It was built from many moments, many memories, many feelings that had been quietly growing over time. They didn't know where to start, so they started with what felt closest. The fact that you had been on their mind more than usual. That one sentence opened something. Because once the first honest thought is written, the rest begins to follow. And that is exactly what happened. One thought led to another. One memory connected to another. They began to write about things they had never said before, not because they were hiding them intentionally, but because they had never fully understood them until now. As they continued, the letter began to take shape, not as something planned, but as something that unfolded naturally, guided by whatever they were feeling in that moment. They wrote about the way they remembered your conversations, the ease of communication that didn't require effort, the way being around you felt comfortable in a way that wasn't easy to find. They wrote about moments that may have seemed small at the time but now felt significant when looked at from this perspective. And with each word, the weight they had been carrying began to shift. It didn't disappear, but it became clearer. Because putting something into words forces you to understand it in a way that thinking alone does not. As they continued writing, they began to realize something they hadn't fully admitted to themselves before, that what they felt for you had more depth than they had allowed themselves to acknowledge. This realization didn't come suddenly. It built gradually, through the act of writing itself. Each sentence brought them closer to understanding something that had been quietly present for a long time. And once they saw it clearly, they could not ignore it anymore. The letter was no longer just a collection of thoughts. It had become something meaningful, something real, something that represented a truth they had finally allowed themselves to face. At the same time, there was hesitation. Because writing something and sharing it are two very different things. Writing allowed them to express freely, without fear of reaction. But the idea of you seeing those words, of you understanding what they meant, created uncertainty. They began to question whether they should send it, whether you would understand, whether the timing was right. But even with that hesitation, something had already changed. Because now the truth existed outside of their thoughts. It was no longer something hidden or undefined. It had been written, shaped, and understood. And once something reaches that point, it cannot return to being unspoken in the same way. You may not know about this yet. From your side, everything may still feel the same. There may be no message, no sign, no direct indication that anything has happened. But something has. A shift has taken place, not in your external reality yet, but in the internal world of someone who has finally allowed themselves to see and express what they feel. And that shift is what you are beginning to sense now, even if you cannot fully explain it. Because when something meaningful is created, especially something tied to real emotion, it carries energy that does not stay contained for long. Right now, they are still in the space between expression and action, between writing and deciding what to do next. But they are no longer where they were before this moment happened. They have crossed a line within themselves, from not knowing to understanding, from holding back to expressing, even if only privately for now. And once that line is crossed, everything that follows begins to move in a new direction, one that will eventually bring this hidden truth into the open in a way that you will soon begin to experience directly. After writing everything down, they didn't immediately feel relief the way they thought they might, and this is where the situation began to shift even more deeply, because instead of closing the emotions they had just expressed, it actually opened them further, making everything feel more real, more present, and impossible to ignore. The words they had written were no longer just thoughts in their mind. They were now something visible, something they could read back, something that reflected a truth they could no longer deny. And when they looked at it again, slowly going through each sentence, each memory, each feeling they had finally put into words, they began to realize just how much they had been holding inside for so long without fully understanding it. At first, they may have sat there quietly, unsure of what to do next, almost as if they were trying to process what they themselves had just created. Because sometimes, when emotions are expressed honestly for the first time, they can feel overwhelming, not in a chaotic way, but in a deeply grounding way that forces you to face something real. And that is exactly what was happening to them. They weren't just thinking about you anymore. They were feeling everything in a much clearer and more intense way. The memories they wrote about began to feel closer, more vivid, as if they were happening again in their mind. The conversations, the small moments, the way things felt when everything was natural and easy, it all came back with a kind of emotional clarity that they hadn't experienced before. And with that clarity came realization. They began to understand that what they had with you was not something ordinary or easily replaceable. It wasn't just another connection or passing interaction. It had meaning, depth, and a sense of comfort that they hadn't fully appreciated when it was present. And now, seeing it all written out in front of them, they could no longer pretend that it was something small or insignificant. This is where the internal conflict begins. Because once someone recognizes the value of something they may have lost or distanced themselves from, they are faced with a choice: either continue to ignore it and move forward as if nothing has changed, or confront it and risk stepping into something uncertain. They may have tried, even after writing everything, to convince themselves that it was enough just to express it privately, that they didn't need to take it any further, that the letter could remain unseen and still serve its purpose. But that thought didn't sit comfortably with them. Because the more they thought about it, the more they realized that the letter wasn't just about releasing emotion, it was about communicating something that had never been said. And communication, by its nature, is not meant to stay hidden. This realization began to create a new kind of pressure inside them. Not the same kind that pushed them to write, but a different kind. The pressure of knowing that something important has been said, even if only to themselves, and now deciding whether it should be shared. They may have picked up the letter again, reading it multiple times, each time noticing something new, each time feeling something a little deeper. And with each reading, the idea of keeping it to themselves began to feel less right. Because when something is true, when something comes from a place of honesty, it naturally seeks expression beyond just the person who feels it. At the same time, fear begins to appear. Not fear of what they feel, that part is now clear, but fear of what might happen if they show it to you. They begin to wonder how you will respond, whether you will understand the depth of what they are trying to express, whether the timing is right, whether too much time has passed, whether you still feel something similar or if your perspective has changed. These questions do not have immediate answers, and that uncertainty is what creates hesitation. But even with that hesitation, something important has already shifted. Because now, they are no longer unaware. They are no longer uncertain about what they feel. They are standing in a place where the truth is clear, even if the next step is not. And that clarity is what changes everything. They may try to delay the decision, telling themselves they will think about it later, that they need more time, that they should wait for the right moment. But the feeling does not fade. In fact, it grows stronger. Because once something is brought into the light, it does not return to being hidden easily. It stays present, it continues to ask for attention, and it slowly moves toward expression. You may not see any of this happening yet, but something has already changed in a way that will not stay internal for long. The letter they wrote is not just a collection of words, it is a turning point. It represents the moment where everything they felt became clear, where everything unspoken became understood. And once that understanding exists, it begins to move toward action, even if that action has not fully taken place yet. Right now, they are standing in that space between knowing and doing, between expression and decision. But the direction is already set. Because once someone reaches this level of awareness, it is only a matter of time before what they have written, what they have felt, and what they have realized begins to move beyond them and into something that will reach you directly. As they sit with everything they've written, the space around them begins to feel different, almost heavier but at the same time clearer, as if something inside them has shifted in a way that cannot be undone, and this is where the emotional weight of the situation truly begins to take hold. What once felt like thoughts they could control or push aside has now become something they are fully aware of, something they cannot escape even if they try. The letter in front of them is no longer just a piece of writing, it is a reflection of everything they have been feeling, everything they didn't fully understand before, and everything they can no longer ignore. They may read it again, slowly, carefully, almost as if they are trying to see it from a different perspective, as if they are trying to understand not just what they wrote, but what it means for them now. And with each reading, the emotions attached to those words become stronger, more defined, more real. They begin to feel the depth of what they expressed in a way that thinking alone never allowed them to. Because writing has a way of making things tangible, of turning something abstract into something concrete. And now that it is concrete, it carries weight. This is when they begin to realize that this is not something they can simply move on from. It is not something that will fade or lose importance with time. Instead, it feels like something that is growing, something that is becoming more significant the more they acknowledge it. They may start to notice how their thoughts are now centered around you more than ever, not just because of the memories, but because of what those memories now represent. They are no longer just recalling the past, they are understanding its meaning. And that understanding changes everything. They begin to connect moments that once felt separate, seeing how they all form a pattern, how they all point to something that has been there for a long time without being fully recognized. And that realization creates a sense of urgency, not in a rushed or chaotic way, but in a steady, persistent way that does not go away. It feels like something that needs to be addressed, something that cannot remain unspoken any longer. At the same time, there is still hesitation. Because understanding something internally and expressing it externally are two very different things. Internally, there is safety. There is no risk of misunderstanding, no fear of rejection, no uncertainty about how the other person will respond. But the moment something is shared, all of that changes. And this is where they begin to feel conflicted. They may ask themselves whether they should send the letter, whether you are in a place to receive it, whether it would change things in a way they cannot predict. These questions create a kind of pause, a moment where they hold back, even though the desire to act is growing stronger. But even in that hesitation, something important is happening. They are no longer questioning whether their feelings are real. That part is already clear. The only question now is what to do with that truth. And when someone reaches that point, where the truth is clear but the action is uncertain, it means they are very close to making a decision. They may try to delay it, telling themselves they need more time, that they should wait for the right moment, that they should think about it more carefully. But the truth is, the more they wait, the stronger the feeling becomes. Because once something is acknowledged at this level, it does not fade with time, it intensifies. It continues to occupy their thoughts, it continues to return in quiet moments, it continues to remind them that something important has been left unresolved. You may begin to sense something at this stage, even if you cannot explain it. A subtle feeling that something is shifting, that something is about to happen. This is not random. It is connected to the process they are going through, to the emotions they are experiencing, to the decision they are slowly moving toward. Because when someone reaches this level of clarity, it creates a kind of momentum that eventually leads to action. They are no longer in the same place they were before writing that letter. They have crossed a line internally, from not knowing to understanding, from holding back to expressing, even if only to themselves. And once that line is crossed, there is no returning to the state of not knowing. Everything that follows moves forward, even if it feels slow or uncertain in the moment. Right now, they are standing at the edge of that forward movement, where the decision to keep everything inside or to share it with you becomes more immediate, more pressing. And even though they may not have acted yet, the direction is already clear. Because once the truth has been written, once it has been seen and felt and understood, it naturally seeks to be shared. And that is the stage they are in now. Very close to turning something private into something that will reach you, something that will break the silence in a way that you will not expect, but that has been building for much longer than you realize. As everything continues to unfold inside them, they reach a point where the silence between what they feel and what they have expressed only to themselves begins to feel heavier than before, and this is where the internal shift becomes more intense, more focused, and much closer to turning into real action. Up until now, they have been moving through a process, first noticing, then feeling, then writing, and now understanding. But understanding alone is no longer enough. The truth they have written down is not something they can simply leave behind or pretend does not require a response. It has become something that follows them, something that stays in their thoughts even when they try to focus on other things. They may go about their day, interacting with others, completing tasks, appearing as they normally would on the outside, but internally, there is a constant awareness of what they have written, of what it represents, and of what it means for them now. And this constant awareness is what creates pressure, not a chaotic or overwhelming pressure, but a steady, persistent one that does not go away. It feels like something unfinished, something waiting, something that cannot remain in its current state forever. They may begin to feel that keeping the letter to themselves is no longer enough, that while writing it helped them understand their feelings, it did not resolve them. Because feelings that are meant to be shared do not settle when they remain hidden, they continue to grow. And this growth is what they are experiencing now. Each time they think about the letter, each time they remember the words they wrote, the emotions behind those words become stronger, more present, more difficult to ignore. They may start to feel that what they have written is not just something personal, but something that belongs in a conversation, something that was meant to reach you. And this realization is what begins to shift their mindset from hesitation toward intention. They are no longer asking themselves whether their feelings are real, that part is already clear. Now they are asking themselves whether they are willing to take the risk of expressing those feelings directly to you. And that question carries weight, because it involves stepping into uncertainty, into a space where they cannot control how things will unfold. They do not know how you will react, they do not know whether you will understand the depth of what they are trying to communicate, and they do not know whether the timing is right. These unknowns create hesitation, but they do not remove the desire to act. In fact, the desire continues to grow, because the more they understand what they feel, the more they realize that staying silent is no longer an option that feels right. They may begin to imagine what it would be like to send the letter, to let you read those words, to allow you to see what they have finally understood about their feelings. They may think about how the conversation might unfold, how you might respond, how everything might change after that moment. And these thoughts may feel both exciting and uncertain at the same time, because they represent a shift from what is known to what is unknown. But even with that uncertainty, something inside them is moving forward. The hesitation is still there, but it is no longer strong enough to stop the process. Instead, it becomes something they move through rather than something that holds them back completely. They may find themselves returning to the letter again and again, reading it, adjusting it, adding to it, not because it is incomplete, but because they are trying to align themselves with the idea of sharing it. Each time they read it, it feels more real, more significant, more connected to what they truly feel. And with each reading, the idea of keeping it hidden feels less right. Because once something is understood at this level, it naturally seeks expression. You may not see this happening yet, but you may begin to feel something changing, a subtle sense that something is about to shift, that something is moving toward you even if it has not reached you yet. This feeling is not random. It is connected to the process they are going through, to the decision they are slowly moving toward. Because they are no longer in the stage of questioning what they feel, they are in the stage of deciding what to do with it. And once someone reaches that stage, action becomes inevitable, even if it takes a little time to fully take shape. Right now, they are standing at the edge of that action, where the internal truth they have written is about to move outward into something real, something that will break the silence in a way that you may not expect, but that has been building steadily through every thought, every memory, and every word they have written leading up to this moment. As everything continues to build inside them, it reaches a point where the balance between holding back and expressing what they feel begins to shift completely, and this is where the emotional intensity becomes impossible for them to ignore any longer, because what they have written is no longer just something they can keep to themselves without consequence. The letter has become more than words. It has become a reflection of truth, a truth they now fully understand, and once truth is understood at that level, it does not remain quiet. It begins to push outward, asking to be seen, asking to be shared, asking to be acknowledged beyond the space of their own thoughts. They may begin to feel a kind of restlessness now, something subtle but constant, something that follows them throughout their day, making it difficult to fully focus on anything else for too long without their mind returning to you and to what they have written. This restlessness is not random. It is the result of everything inside them reaching a point where it can no longer stay contained. They may try to distract themselves, to return to their routine, to convince themselves that they can wait longer, that they can keep everything inside for just a little more time. But each attempt to push it aside only makes it return stronger, more present, more difficult to ignore. Because when something meaningful is ready to be expressed, delaying it does not reduce its intensity, it increases it. They may start to notice that even simple moments are affected by this. A quiet pause, a moment of stillness, a break in their routine, and suddenly their thoughts return to you, to the letter, to the words they wrote and what those words mean. It becomes clear to them that this is not something that will fade on its own. It is something that needs to be acted on. And this realization is what begins to remove the hesitation that was once stronger. The fear is still there, the uncertainty is still present, but they are no longer strong enough to stop what is building. Because now, the fear of keeping everything inside has become greater than the fear of expressing it. They may begin to feel that if they do not share what they have written, they will carry this weight indefinitely, always wondering what would have happened if they had taken that step. And that thought is what begins to push them forward. They may pick up the letter again, reading it more carefully than ever, not just as something they wrote, but as something they are considering giving to you. And this changes how they see it. It is no longer just personal, it becomes something that could create a moment between both of you, something that could change the dynamic completely. They may begin to imagine what it would feel like for you to read it, how you might react, whether you would understand the depth behind the words, whether you would feel the same connection that they are now clearly aware of. These thoughts bring both anticipation and uncertainty, but they also bring something else, clarity. Because even with all the unknowns, they know one thing for certain now: what they feel is real, and it matters enough to be expressed. And that certainty is what begins to guide their next steps. They may still hesitate, still pause, still question the timing, but the direction is no longer unclear. They are moving toward action, even if that movement is gradual. You may begin to feel something stronger at this stage, a sense that something is about to happen, that something is building in a way that cannot stay hidden much longer. This feeling is connected to the process they are going through, to the energy of what they are experiencing, to the decision that is forming more clearly with each passing moment. Because once someone reaches this level of emotional clarity, the next step is no longer a question of if, it becomes a question of when. They are no longer in the stage of wondering whether to act. They are in the stage of preparing themselves to act. And that preparation is what brings everything closer to becoming real. The letter is no longer just something they wrote, it is something they are now considering sharing, something that represents a moment that has the potential to change everything between you. And once something reaches that level of importance, it does not remain hidden for long. It moves forward, step by step, until it reaches the point where it is finally expressed, where the silence is broken, and where everything that has been building inside them is brought into the open in a way that you will soon experience directly. Now everything inside them reaches a level where holding back no longer feels like a choice, but like a weight they cannot continue carrying, and this is where the shift becomes undeniable, where what has been building quietly begins to move towards something real and visible. The letter is no longer just something they revisit occasionally. It has become something constant in their awareness, something that follows them throughout their day, something that keeps reminding them that there is a truth they have not yet shared with you. Every time they think about it, every time they remember the words they wrote, the feeling becomes stronger, more present, more difficult to push aside. They may begin to feel that the longer they wait, the more intense everything becomes, as if the delay itself is adding pressure to something that is already at its limit. And this is what starts to change their mindset completely. The hesitation that once made them pause is still there, but it is no longer in control. Instead, it becomes something they are moving through, something they are learning to face rather than avoid. Because now, the idea of keeping everything inside feels heavier than the idea of taking the risk. They may begin to feel that if they do not act soon, they will regret it, not because of what might happen if they reach out, but because of what might happen if they don't. That sense of potential regret is powerful, because it shifts the focus from fear of the unknown to the fear of missed opportunity. And once someone begins to think in that way, action becomes much closer than before. They may start to prepare themselves more intentionally now. Not just thinking about whether they should send the letter, but thinking about how they will do it, when they will do it, what it will look like when it finally reaches you. They may go through different scenarios in their mind, imagining how the moment will unfold, how you might react, how the conversation might begin. These thoughts may still carry uncertainty, but they also carry a sense of inevitability, because deep down, they know that this is something they are moving toward, not away from. At the same time, the emotional intensity behind what they wrote begins to feel even more real. They are no longer just reading the words, they are feeling them fully, understanding them completely, recognizing that what they expressed is not something temporary or surface level. It is something that has been growing for a long time, something that now feels too important to remain hidden. And this realization is what removes the last layer of doubt. They may still feel nervous, still feel unsure about how you will respond, but they are no longer unsure about themselves. They know what they feel. They know what the letter means. And they know that keeping it to themselves is no longer something they can continue doing. You may begin to feel something stronger now, a sense that something is about to shift, that something is moving toward you even if it has not reached you yet. This feeling is not random, it is connected to the stage they are in, to the decision that is now forming clearly, to the moment that is approaching where everything will change. Because they are no longer in the stage of questioning or hesitation. They are in the stage of action, even if that action has not fully happened yet. They are preparing themselves to break the silence, to take the risk, to allow you to see what they have been holding inside. And that preparation is what makes this moment feel so close, so immediate, so real. What they are about to do may feel sudden to you, unexpected, even surprising. But for them, it has been a long process, one that started quietly and gradually built into something they could no longer ignore. The letter they wrote was the turning point, the moment where everything became clear. And now, they are standing at the point where that clarity is about to turn into action. There is no more going back to not knowing, no more returning to silence as if nothing has changed. They have crossed that line already. And once that line is crossed, everything moves forward. Right now, they are at the edge of that forward movement, where the decision to share what they feel is no longer distant. It is immediate. And the moment that decision becomes action, everything between you will shift, because what has been hidden will finally be revealed in a way that you will not be able to ignore. Now everything reaches the point where the internal decision they have been slowly moving toward becomes something they can no longer delay, and this is where the shift from preparation to action finally begins to take shape in a real and undeniable way. Up until now, they have been standing on the edge of this moment, thinking, feeling, revisiting the letter, questioning the timing, and trying to gather the courage to take the next step. But there comes a moment when all of that internal movement turns into something outward, when the weight of what they are holding becomes too heavy to carry any longer, and that is exactly where they are now. The hesitation that once slowed them down is still present, but it no longer has the power to stop them. Instead, it exists alongside a stronger force, the certainty that what they feel needs to be expressed. They may feel a mix of emotions at this stage, a combination of nervousness, anticipation, and a kind of quiet determination that they didn't have before. Because now, they are no longer asking themselves whether they should act. That question has already been answered internally. Now, they are simply deciding when and how. They may pick up the letter again, reading it one more time, not to change it, but to connect with it, to remind themselves of what it represents and why it matters. And as they read it, the emotions behind those words become even clearer, even stronger, reinforcing the decision they are about to make. They begin to understand that this is not just about expressing feelings, it is about breaking a silence that has been holding something important back. And once that understanding settles in, the final barrier begins to fall. They may feel a moment of pause, a brief hesitation before taking action, because stepping into something unknown always carries a certain level of uncertainty. But this time, the pause is different. It is not about doubt, it is about the weight of the moment. Because they know that once they take this step, things will change. The dynamic between you will no longer be the same as it was before. The silence will be replaced with honesty, and honesty always brings clarity, even if that clarity leads to something unexpected. And this awareness is what makes the moment feel so significant. They are not acting impulsively, they are acting from a place of understanding, from a place where everything has already been processed and acknowledged. This is why what they are about to do may feel intense when it reaches you. It may not come across as something casual or light, because it carries the weight of everything they have been holding inside. It carries the depth of their realization, the meaning of the connection as they now understand it, and the courage it took for them to finally express it. They may send the letter in a way that feels direct, or they may introduce it carefully, but either way, the moment it leaves their hands, everything shifts. Because now, what was once private becomes shared. What was once hidden becomes visible. And what was once uncertain becomes something you can see and feel clearly. You may experience this moment as sudden, as something you did not expect, especially if you were not aware of everything that has been happening on their side. But for them, this has been building for a long time. The letter is not a spontaneous expression, it is the result of a process that began quietly and grew steadily until it reached this point. And now that it has been sent or is about to be sent, there is a sense of release on their side, not because everything is resolved, but because they have finally done what they felt they needed to do. At the same time, there is vulnerability. Because now, the outcome is no longer in their control. They have expressed what they feel, but how it is received is something they cannot predict. And this is where your role becomes important. Because once the letter reaches you, the dynamic shifts from being something internal on their side to something shared between both of you. You may feel a mix of emotions when you read it: surprise, curiosity, perhaps even a sense of intensity that you did not anticipate. But what is important to understand is that this moment is not just about the words themselves. It is about everything behind those words, the process, the realization, the emotional buildup that led to this point. And now, everything that follows will be shaped not just by what they have expressed, but by how you choose to respond to it. Because the silence has been broken, the truth has been revealed, and the connection is now standing in a place where it can no longer remain undefined. It has reached a turning point, and from here, everything begins to move forward in a way that will depend on the choices made in this exact moment. Now everything has reached its final stage, where what was once hidden, uncertain, and quietly building inside them has fully transitioned into something real, something visible, and something that now exists between both of you rather than only within them, and this is where the entire meaning of what just happened begins to settle into clarity. The moment the letter leaves their hands and reaches you, the silence that once defined the connection is no longer the same. It has been replaced with truth, truth that was not rushed, not impulsive, but built slowly through reflection, realization, and emotional honesty. And now that truth is no longer something they carry alone. It is something you can see, something you can feel, something you can understand in your own way. What may feel sudden to you is actually the result of everything that has been unfolding behind the scenes for a long time. Every thought they had, every moment they paused and reflected, every time they revisited the letter and questioned whether they should send it, all of that has led to this exact point. And now that it has happened, there is no returning to how things were before. The dynamic has already shifted. What was once uncertain is now clear. What was once unspoken is now expressed. And what was once hidden is now something you have the ability to respond to directly. This is what makes this moment so important. It is not just about receiving a letter, it is about stepping into a new stage of the connection where everything is out in the open. And when everything is out in the open, there is no more guessing, no more wondering what the other person feels or what they might do. That uncertainty has been replaced with clarity, and clarity changes everything. You may find yourself experiencing a range of emotions when you read what they have written. There may be surprise, especially if you did not expect something this direct or this honest. There may be curiosity, as you begin to understand the depth of what they have been feeling. There may even be a sense of intensity, because the words you are reading are not casual, they carry the weight of everything they have been holding inside. But alongside those emotions, there is also something else, understanding. Because as you read, you begin to see not just the words, but the meaning behind them. You begin to understand the process they went through, even if you were not aware of it at the time. You begin to see how their perspective changed, how their awareness deepened, and how everything led to this moment of expression. And that understanding is what allows you to respond from a place of clarity rather than reaction. This is where your role becomes central. Because now, the direction of everything that follows depends on how you choose to respond. You are not required to match their intensity. You are not required to respond immediately. You are not required to feel the same way they do. What you are given in this moment is not pressure, it is awareness. You now have the truth in front of you, and that truth allows you to decide what this connection means to you now. You may take time to reflect, to understand your own feelings, to see whether what they have expressed aligns with what you feel at this stage. You may realize that there is still something there, something that feels real and worth exploring now that everything is clear. Or you may realize that while the connection was meaningful, your perspective has changed, and you no longer see it in the same way. Both of these outcomes are valid, because what matters now is not what existed in the past, but what exists in the present. This is what this entire process was leading to, not just their expression, but your clarity. Because clarity is what allows you to move forward without confusion, without doubt, and without being influenced by emotions you do not fully understand. As everything settles, the intensity of the moment begins to transform into something calmer, something more grounded, something that you can process without feeling overwhelmed. Not because the situation has lost its importance, but because it has gained clarity. And clarity is what creates stability. It allows you to see things as they are, not as they seemed before. It allows you to make decisions that are aligned with your understanding, rather than reacting to the intensity of the moment. This is the true outcome of everything that has happened, not just the letter, not just their confession, but the clarity that now exists between both of you. Because once something is fully understood, it no longer creates confusion. It creates direction. And that direction is now in your hands. Whatever you choose next will not come from uncertainty or assumption, it will come from a place of full awareness of everything that has been revealed. And that is what makes this moment not just an ending, but a beginning of something new, defined not by silence, but by understanding and choice. Now that everything has been revealed and the silence has been replaced with truth, this is where a deeper understanding begins to settle within you, not in a rushed or overwhelming way, but in a calm and steady way that allows you to fully see what this entire experience was meant to show you. At first, this situation may have felt confusing, uncertain, or even emotionally heavy, especially when there were no clear answers, no direct expressions, and no way to fully understand what was happening on their side. But now, everything has shifted. The letter you received is not just a message, it is the result of a long internal journey they went through, a journey that you were not able to see while it was happening. And now that you can see the outcome of that journey, everything that once felt unclear begins to make sense. The silence that once created distance now feels like something that allowed truth to form. It created space for them to reflect, to understand, and to finally express what they had been holding inside. And at the same time, it gave you the opportunity to step back, to observe, to gain your own perspective without being influenced by their presence or their emotions. This is why this moment feels different now. You are no longer standing in confusion. You are standing in clarity. And clarity is what changes how you experience everything moving forward. You may begin to notice that your emotions are more grounded than they were before, not because the situation is less important, but because you now understand it. Understanding removes the uncertainty that once made everything feel overwhelming. You no longer have to guess what they feel. You have seen it directly. You no longer have to wonder what the connection means, you have been shown its depth through their words. And this awareness gives you something powerful, it gives you control over your response. You are no longer reacting to something unknown. You are choosing how to move forward based on what is now clearly visible. This is where your own truth becomes the most important part of the situation. Because while they have expressed their feelings, your role is not to mirror them or to respond immediately out of emotion. Your role is to understand how you feel, how your perspective has evolved, and what this connection means to you now, in the present moment. You may find yourself reflecting on the past, on how things were when communication was active, on how the connection felt before the silence began. And you may notice that your understanding of those moments has changed. You may see things more clearly now, recognizing what was real, what was meaningful, and what may have been left unspoken at the time. This reflection is not about going backward, it is about understanding what has led you to this point. Because once you understand the path, you can move forward with clarity. You may also begin to consider what you want now, separate from what they feel or what they have expressed. Because this moment is not just about receiving their truth. It is about recognizing your own. You may feel that there is still something there, something that aligns with what they have shared, something that feels worth exploring now that everything is open and honest. Or you may feel that while their feelings are real and meaningful, your perspective has shifted in a different direction, and the connection no longer feels the same to you. Both of these realizations are valid, because what matters now is not what existed before, but what feels true for you now. This is what makes this stage so important. It is no longer about discovery, it is about decision. Not a rushed or pressured decision, but a conscious one, made from a place of understanding rather than confusion. You are now in a position where you can choose your next step with clarity, knowing exactly what has been revealed and what it means. And that choice is what will shape everything that follows. As everything continues to settle, you may also feel a sense of calm replacing the intensity that once surrounded the situation. Not because everything has been resolved completely, but because there is no longer anything hidden. And when nothing is hidden, there is no confusion left to create doubt. There is only truth. And truth, even when it carries emotional weight, brings clarity and direction. This entire experience, from the silence to the realization to the letter that brought everything into the open, has led to this moment, not just for them, but for you as well. Because it has given you something valuable, the ability to see clearly, to understand deeply, and to choose consciously. And that is what allows you to move forward without hesitation, without regret, and without being influenced by uncertainty. Whatever you choose next will come from a place of full awareness, and that is what makes this moment not just an ending, but a transition into something new, defined by clarity, honesty, and your own understanding of what truly matters to you now. Now everything has reached its final point, where what once felt like a journey filled with uncertainty, silence, and unspoken emotions has transformed into something clear, grounded, and fully understood, and this is where you begin to see that nothing that happened between you and your soulmate was without purpose. Every moment of silence, every thought that built inside them, every word they wrote, and every feeling that finally reached you was part of a process that led both of you to this exact place of clarity. What once felt confusing now feels meaningful. What once felt like distance now feels like necessary space. And what once felt like unanswered questions now feels like something that has already revealed its answers, even if those answers came in a way you did not expect. This is where you begin to understand that the silence was not something that took away from the connection, it was something that revealed the truth of it. Without that silence, they may have never stopped to understand what you truly meant to them. Without that distance, they may have continued moving forward without ever recognizing the depth of what they felt. And without that pause, you may not have had the opportunity to step back and see everything from your own perspective, without being influenced by their presence or their emotions. This is why this moment feels different now. It no longer carries the same emotional weight or confusion that it once did. Instead, it carries clarity, and clarity is what allows you to move forward with confidence. You are no longer reacting to something you do not understand. You are choosing what to do with something you now see clearly. And that choice is what defines what happens next. You are not in a position of waiting anymore. You are not trying to figure out what they feel or what they might do. That part of the journey is complete. They have already shown you. They have already expressed what was hidden. They have already taken their step. And now, everything rests in your hands, not as pressure, but as freedom. You have the freedom to decide what this connection means to you now, based on everything that has been revealed. And that freedom is powerful, because it allows you to move forward in a way that is aligned with your own truth rather than influenced by uncertainty or emotional intensity. You may begin to reflect on how much has changed from the beginning of this situation to now. At first, there may have been confusion, questions, and a sense of not fully understanding what was happening. But now, there is clarity. You understand what led to this moment, you understand what they feel, and you understand what the connection represents. And that understanding removes the emotional pressure that once made everything feel overwhelming. You are no longer caught in the intensity, you are observing it from a place of awareness. And from that place, your decisions become stronger, more grounded, and more intentional. You may also recognize that your own feelings have evolved during this process. Time, distance, and reflection have a way of changing perspective, and that is natural. You are not the same person you were before this silence began, and they are not the same person either. Both of you have gone through a process of awareness, even if it happened differently on each side. And now, the connection you are looking at is not the same as it was before. It has been revealed, understood, and seen in a deeper way. This is why whatever you choose next will not be based on assumption or expectation, it will be based on truth. And truth is what allows something to either move forward in a real and meaningful way or to be released without regret. Because when something is fully understood, there is no need to question it afterward. You will know why you chose what you chose. You will understand your own reasoning, and that understanding is what gives you peace. As everything settles, you may also notice a sense of calm replacing the intensity that once surrounded this situation. Not because everything is perfectly resolved, but because nothing is hidden anymore. There is no guessing, no uncertainty, no confusion. There is only clarity. And clarity is what allows you to move forward without hesitation. Whether you choose to reconnect, to explore what has been revealed, or to move in a different direction entirely, your decision will come from a place of awareness, not reaction. And that is what makes this final stage so important. It is not about what happened, it is about what you now understand. Because understanding transforms everything. It turns confusion into clarity, silence into meaning, and emotion into direction. And now, standing in this place of full awareness, you have everything you need to decide what comes next, not based on what once was, but based on what is true for you now, in this moment.